Shalom, how's everyone doing? Today is day 41 of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and we'll be learning Siman Hey, Seif Yud Aleph. Let's begin. Yatsa mimeno ruach mamata. Somebody who passes gas, Asr b'davar shebekdusha. It's asr for him to say Dvarim shebekdusha ad sheyichla hareach, until the smell goes away. Ve'em yatsa mechavero. Right, if it came out from his friend, Gam kein tzarich lahamtin. He also has to wait. Rak im hu osik b'liman Torah. However, if he's learning Torah, eino tzarich lahamtin b'shvil reach sheyatsa mechavero. Right, if he's personally learning, he doesn't have to wait for the smell to go away if it came from his friend. Okay. So obviously, until now, we've been dealing with the halachas that one is not allowed to say Dvarim shebekdusha in the presence of tzoa. But as the Gemara defines it, tzoa is something called a reach ra sheyesh lo ikr. Right, it's a bad smell, and it comes from a defined source. Right, it comes from something physical. Right, tzoa is something physical, and the bad smell comes from that. Right, so that's gonna be the right. As we're saying that this really it's usher even on a deoraisa level to say Dvarim shebekdusha in the presence of tzoa. That's because tzoa is a physical thing and the smell comes out from it. But now we're going to discuss something that has a bad smell, but it doesn't come from something physical, right? As we're saying here, as the Kitzur says, somebody who passes gas. That's not a physical thing that you can't. It's not something that you could just take and hold. It's not a physical thing. So the question is, does it have the same status as tzoa? And it's just like by tzoa, you have to separate when you say Dvarim shebekdusha, or also by bad smell that doesn't have a defined source. So the Gemara talks about this. This is in Brachos Chafei. It says as follows: Right, let's say you have a bad smell that there's no source to it. Right, there's no physical source. What's the din? So Amar Lahu, he said back, Asu chazu hanei tzipi debeirav dehanu ganu v'hanu garse. Right, he says if you go to the base medrash, you'll see that there are people sleeping in the base medrash, and there's an assumption that when people sleep, they also are going to pass gas at some point. And people don't care, they just continue learning. So we see, it's not a problem. But then the Gemara says, no. Hane mili b'divrei Torah, aval b'kriyas shema lo. That, this whole halacha is just a divrei Torah halacha, that if you're in the middle of learning Torah and somebody next to you passes gas, even though it has a bad smell, you can still continue learning, but it does not apply to kriyas shema. So, okay, so that's already something very interesting, right? When it comes to tzoa, if you're in the presence of tzoa, you can't daven, you can't learn, you can't do anything. But here, the Gemara makes a chilek between, at least between learning and between kriyas shema. So, why is there, what's that all about? So if you look in Rashi, Rashi says, that when it comes to, learning, Rashi says, mishum delo efshar. Right? Because what's the case? The case is that these people were sitting in the base medrash, and that's where they were going to learn. That's where there's farmer. That's where they were learning. That's where the person was giving shir. So if somebody passes gas next to them, it would be a lot of bittul Torah if they would go out and run the room and run out of the room, and that would not be good. But when it comes to kriyas shema, since you know kriyas shema by heart, it's very simple to just go out of the room and just finish shema over there. Okay, so that is what the Gemara says. Okay, but if you look in the Pri Megadim in Siman Ayin Test, he says the whole basis of this Gemara, that we even allowed divrei Torah in the presence of a reach ra she'ein lo ikr, right, bad smell that doesn't have a source, is because the whole isser of saying Dvarim shebekdusha by a bad smell that has no source, that's only going to be an isser d'Rabbanan. Therefore, the Rabbanan could waive that isser by the case of Talmud Torah. Okay, so that is by that. And since this is considered a reach ra she'ein lo ikr, and it's only going to be a d'Rabbanan, if you look at the poskim, they say other kulos as well. Right? For example, the Maharshem has a kula that the whole reason for this isur d'Rabbanan of not being able to say Dvarim shebekdusha in the presence of a bad smell that has no source is because if you're saying it by something that doesn't have a source, you're going to end up saying it by things that do have a source by tzoa, which is the real isur d'oraisa. So the Maharsham says that this d'Rabbanan only applies if you actually could smell it, right? So for example, if you personally can't smell, the isur d'Rabbanan will not apply, and also if you use like a type of spray that it gets rid of the smell, that also would be okay. Okay, that's about passing gas. Okay. Number two is about the next case, a case we've discussed before. We discussed before about a case that, let's say you have tzoa, and you put it in in a covering. So the halacha is, as the Gemara says, you're allowed to say Devar Shemikdusha since it's covered. We said an exception to that rule is if you could smell it. Right? The halacha is that if the smell goes past the covering, one is not actually allowed to say Devar Shemikdusha. But the question is, how far away do you have to go from the smell? Right? So when it comes to normal tzoa that's not covered, usually you have to go 4 amos from where the smell ends. So would that same thing apply to this case of tzoa that's covered? Right? Let's say you have tzoa that's covered and it leaves the covering. Do you have to go 4 amos away from the smell itself? So pashpshat you probably do. Because this is tzoa, it has a bad smell, you have to go 4 amos away from where the smell ends. However, if you look in the Rashba says that tzoa in a covering and the smell goes out of the covering is considered a reach ra she'ein lo iker. It's considered a smell that doesn't have a defined source. Why does it not have a defined source? Because the defined source is covered. So therefore, we have the various kulos, the same kulos that we find by passing gas, right? So kula number 1 is there's no idea of going away 4 amos from the smell. You just have to go far enough away that you can't smell it anymore. Second, we have the kula of Maharsham that as long as you personally don't smell it, you'd also be good to go. And we would have those kulos. Right? That's what the Rashba says. So, the question is, do we paskin like this Rashba? So if you look in Siman test, if you look in the Mishabura says there's a major machlokas achronim, many achronim on each side, if we actually paskin like this Rashba, and he doesn't give an answer. He doesn't say who he paskin like. And why do I care so much about this case? Because this case is a ma'asim b'chol yom. It happens all the time. Why do I say that? Because let's say you have a baby, and the baby has a dirty diaper. So, what should we do in this situation? Let's say you're standing by a baby, you're right next to a baby, he has a dirty diaper. What do you do now? So let's think about it. This is tzoa that's covered, right? So if you hold like the pashup shot that is just normal tzoa, you would have to actually go 4 amos away from where the smell ends. So what's the case, right? The kid has tzoa in his diaper. If you're able to smell that tzoa from outside the diaper, you'd actually have to go 4 amos away from the smell itself. However, according to the Rashba, that we just look at this tzoa, since it's in the diaper, it's covered, we look at it like a reach ra she'ein lo iker, because there's no source, the source is covered. You actually just have to go, you could even be right next to the baby, as long as you personally don't smell it, you could say Devar Shemikdusha. So, that's why this is a very, very applicable case. So who do we hold? Like, do we hold that covered tzoa is yesh lo iker and you have to go 4 amos away, or it's ein lo iker that you just can't smell it? So it seems like most poskim say that lechatchila one should actually be machmer and go 4 amos away from the smell itself. So with that in mind, they ask a question. Let's say you're about to say a Devar Shemikdusha and you're standing right next to a baby. You're standing right next to a baby. Do you have to go out of your way and check to see if that baby has a dirty diaper? Because if he does, you have to go another 4 amos away, right? Even though you personally can't smell it, because you're far enough that you can't smell it, but you'd have to go 4 amos from the smell itself. So, the Orlet Sion has a tshuva about this. This is in Chelik Beis, Parak Vav. He talks about this. He says, Nira she'im ein yodea metinuk lich lechulo, eino tzarich levdok. Right, he says, you're not sure, right? You don't know if this kid has a dirty diaper or not. You do not have to check. Because he says there's many doubts involved. Number 1 is a suffix im lech lech. You don't know if there's a dirty diaper there. So it might be totally good to say Devar Shemikdusha right now. Second, even if he does have a dirty diaper, you don't know that the smell goes past the covering, right? L'kulayama, if the smell stays in the covering, that's the normal case of covered tzoa, and you're also good to go. And number 3, even if it does have a smell that goes past the covering, maybe we paskin like the Rashba. Maybe we paskin like the Rashba that a smell past the covering is okay because it's and the Rashba says it's the reach ra she'ein lo iker, so you just have to go away from the smell itself. So that's what he writes. But then he says in the end, But if you know for sure that he has a dirty diaper, then that suffix goes away. The first suffix was you don't know if if there's a dirty diaper or not. But if you're 100% positive there's a dirty diaper, then you'd actually have to check to see if the smell goes through the diaper to know if you have to go another 4 amos away. Okay, shkoyach.